United States Army blew up a hospital in somewhere in the Middle East. I don't remember exactly. But something was different this time. This time, Doctors Without Borders happened to be at that hospital. Now, what was even more interesting to me as I read the NPR report on this, I wasn't reading this in Drudge Report or anything, I was reading this NPR report on this. What was especially interesting to me is that the Doctors Without Borders organization there had made a point to let the United States know that they were in this hospital, and please don't bomb this hospital, such has our reputation become in the international community. People have argued something that, well, maybe they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I don't agree with that for a second. They were in the right place, a hospital, at the right time when they're sick people. Our government, using our money, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, during this campaign, you're going to hear me talk about a lot of benefits that libertarian policies will bring us. I'm going to talk about how ending the Department of Education is going to improve our quality of education by getting rid of things like Common Core, by making it impossible for colleges to raise tuitions without impunity. I'm going to talk about how ending the income tax is going to attract the best and brightest to America, instead of doing what we've been seeing in the last couple of years where more and more people have been leaving the country. Last year, 4,000 people, a record number, tore up their citizenships or rejected their citizenships, to the point where the United States has even seen fit to increase the cost by about 5 times. It used to be about $400, now it's about $2,000 and some dollars to get, if you want to get rid of your U.S. citizen, that's how much citizenship, that's how much it costs. I'm going to be talking about how completely ending the war on drugs is going to increase safety, how it's going to reduce our taxes, how it's going to help reunite families by getting people out of prison, how it's going to allow drug businesses to settle their disputes in court or through mediation, rather than being forced by our current legal system to resort to violence to settle even the minorest disputes. I'm going to be talking about how ending things like the TSA will allow us to maintain our dignity, how ending and downsizing and defunding mass surveillance will allow us to maintain our privacy and our dignity. But in addition to all these benefits, I start with this example specifically because I believe there's also a deep moral calling. All of us are being forced, against our wills, to support policies that no decent human being could possibly support. And it's this moral calling that we see in our foreign wars. This moral calling that we see when it comes to things like the FDA, which I hope Dr. Rule will be talking about later on, which has robbed so many people of their right to treatment, their right to life, their right to have a healthier and safer life. I'm going to talk about how all of that benefits us. But I also want this campaign to be focused on ways in which we can benefit other people. People who are maybe not our friends or family. Maybe we don't even know them. Maybe they're a different ethnicity than us, but they're still people that we have some responsibility for, primarily because it's our labor and our money that's being used to cause them this kind of harm. I want to make 2 more really quick points. And the first point I want to make is this. Every year, as a member of the Libertarian National Committee, I, like Scott, spend a few $1,000s of my own money to travel, to stay in hotels. I spend a lot of time. I give up work. And I do this because of moral outrage. I do this because I don't like seeing the damage that's being done to small businesses like my own and others. And I put so much time and so much effort of my own based on things that are comparatively small. Now, when people are talking about we need to have this huge military, going out everywhere because people, hate us so much, think about the minor slights that we've received and how much work we put into it compared to the major slights that people receive when their families are annihilated, when their loved ones who are in a hospital trying to get better are suddenly blown up because we bombed the wrong hospital. We were trying to bomb this other hospital, sorry, we bombed your hospital. Think about all that. And that right there is going to be the major focal point of our campaign. In an intra-party sense, I plan to use this campaign and my certain levels of expertise in social media traditional media. Chelsea and I have been sitting down, and she's going to be my campaign manager, have been sitting down and worked through so many different types of things that we can use. And the key thing is we're going to be doing what Scott talked about, which is we're going to take the things that we make and make them available not just to our own campaign, but we're actually going to be trying to set up things that other campaigns, people that haven't run for office before, can use these same tools. And what I'm going to ask from each of you today is I'm going to ask those of you who are willing to volunteer even just an hour a week to talk to me or to Chelsea, at whenever the next break is. I especially need two groups of people. One is I need people who have a lot of experience, people who really understand libertarian issues. And I also need people that have a fresh and new perspective. People who want to work on things like social media. People who want to go out and connect in college campuses. And if you're willing to do one of those two things, our first meeting is this Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you can't make that meeting, that's no big deal because we're going to have another meeting later on the exact following week. And if you're interested and willing to do that, and by the way, because Chelsea and I, because we work in online education, we're going to be doing everything remotely, and we know how to do it. I mean, there's no question that we know more about how to run an online situation. We know more about that than almost anybody in the world because we know how to do it with cantankerous and unwilling teenagers. Hopefully we might even be able to do it with libertarians. I don't know yet. But if you're willing to do that, please sign up. We have a campaign that has a lot of things to do because this is a very ambitious campaign and it's going to help a lot of other campaigns. So if you have an hour a week, I ask you to please do this. Now I'll open the floor for any questions about views or policies or campaign strategy or anything along those lines. I guess I'll ask Dean first. Go ahead.
Okay. As I think you're well aware, there are three ways you can run a libertarian campaign. It was alluded to in the previous discussion. You can be out to win, you can be out to educate, or you can be a paper candidate. It's obvious you're not a paper candidate. Are you going to be out to educate, or is your goal to win?
That's a good question. It's to win, and it's to specifically do one thing, which is my goal is to cut government. And cut government can sometimes happen through directly winning an election. It can also sometimes happen by pressuring other candidates. This year has been an amazingly successful year, the last 12 months, not just the last couple months. Right now in Florida, we're seeing a repeal of traffic cameras happening. In Nevada, we're seeing that people now can opt out of the public school system and use their money for whatever they want, tutoring or books or DVDs, whatever they like. And so I plan to use my campaign partially in this way to directly get the votes, but also to create the kind of political pressure that's going to lead to the change that we want to see. I mean, I really believe that right now in America we are in a time that can only be classified as a full-scale mutiny. We have states that have basically just nullified federal laws and are just daring the federal government to do anything. And while the federal government contemplates the possibility, more states are nullifying more federal laws. We have an entire currency that has come into existence as a direct challenge to the monopoly of the Federal Reserve, leading the Fed to be not just a pipe dream, but almost an inevitability. So I do plan to be using my campaign to push policies in a libertarian direction, either by winning or through political pressure. Go ahead, I think you had a question, sorry.
I'm hoping you can help me out with understanding on this. You mentioned earlier stopping the war on drugs. Mm-hmm. And my question to you is, I grew up in an era where Nancy Reagan said, just say no. Mm-hmm. And what I hear with the Libertarian Party is legalize everything. What that does, that really sends the wrong message to our younger people. Don't you think it's responsible, if we're going to encourage to stop the war on drugs, which encourages drug use with the younger generation, shouldn't we also be doing advertising and education so younger people don't ruin their lives with this drug issue? So we need to educate the younger generation that we believe it shouldn't be our government's problem or position to tell us what we can and can't do, but we also need to educate them about the dangers of the drugs and heroin in our environment and our community.
I think there.
Don't they go hand in hand?
I do think.
Responsible to do both at the same time.
I think that you make an interesting point, and like I've said in many campaign messages of previous campaigns, I don't support drug use. I don't do drugs. I don't even drink alcohol. But at the same time, I don't believe in interfering with somebody else's right to use drugs. Now, when it comes to children, as an educator, this is something that's very important to me. And what I believe is that this is something that's best left to education, and I also believe that education is best left to the private sector. So in my own education business, and I've encouraged other education businesses to do the same, and many have followed suit, in my own education business, I explain exactly why students should not be doing drugs. I explain to them frankly and honestly the real advantages and disadvantages. And I tell them, listen, I understand the advantages that you're looking at. Most people who are young, who are doing drugs, aren't doing it just because they want to get high. They're just like, sitting in their basement. A lot of people who are young and doing drugs are doing it for practical social benefits. And one of the things that we do in my own personal business, not to get too far from the campaign, but one of the things we do in my personal business is teach kids how to get those same social benefits without doing drugs. But I mean, that's not something you're ever going to see coming from a government, because the government doesn't have the flexibility to do something like that. So I do think that drug opposition must continue, but I think it needs to be handled by the private sector.
My question to you, if you're going to dump X amount of effort and money into legalization, shouldn't you equally put out the same amount of effort and money into also educating these kids? Because as a younger generation, they really don't know.
I'd like to step in 1 minute and say that Portugal completely legalized everything, and the usage dropped like a rock within 6 months. There's a spike within 6 months. It happened after we ended prohibition on alcohol in this country. The first 6 months, yeah, people go wild, but after that, it drops like a rock. Portugal and the Netherlands don't have anywhere near the drug usage issues that we have in the United States.
Actually, one of the really interesting things that we've seen is that is according to this whack job libertarian publication called Time magazine, what happened was because so many states have legalized marijuana, because violent cartels depend on marijuana for about 40% of their revenue, they're seeing that they're just in a just purely business economic sense, they're in a lot of pain. So I think there's early evidence to show that we're doing a lot of good even now, and I think we're going to be doing a lot more good with it. Eric, go ahead.
2 questions. One, are you going to be doing fundraising, or you just are you looking for?
Yes, we will definitely be doing fundraising.
And second, you talked about war, and I assume I'm generally non-interventionist. Is that going to be a big part of your campaign?
Yeah, non-interventionism will be a very large part of our campaign. I don't think it's something that we as a party should or can afford to stay away from. I think at this time, as bad as the war on drugs is, and as many lives it destroys, and as many civil liberties as it infringes upon, I think that our foreign wars are doing that even more. So I intend to make it a very central part of the campaign.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's take the vote.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I can't answer
Okay.
it.
All those in favor of his nomination say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.